5. Heliocentrism falsified. Fundamental logical observations have led to the well-known, widely believed model of the universe known as heliocentrism to be irrevocably falsified. All of the evidence used to prove this point are available in the common public domain and should be reviewed and considered by all people who care to know the truth about our natural place in the universe. So, the first point to make in disproving the heliocentric model is to show that observable space is an arbitrary direction depending on the time of year, the time of day, the time of eon, or the sun's alleged path around the so-called galactic center. If you take a look at these animations, this point will become pretty clear. During the summer months, the heliocentric model dictates that we're on the opposite side of the sun during the winter months. The entire heliocentric model is based on this premise. Now, if you consider the fact that visible space is only the sector of space situated on the opposite side of the sun as the Earth. In other words, as the Earth makes its daily alleged spin, an observer will be on the side of the Earth facing the sun at high noon. 12 hours later, at midnight, the same observer will have allegedly traveled over 12,000 miles around a curve and will now theoretically be on the other side of the globe facing away from the sun, again at midnight. This is a fundamental concept to understand, and now that I've explained it and shown some diagrams and animations, we'll begin to see why this fact disproves heliocentrism. One way to animate this that I thought maybe helped to make the principle easier to understand is to picture yourself as standing on the red line mark on the spinning globe here. You'll notice that as your side of the Earth faces in towards the sun, the entire sky becomes bright blue and you can't see the stars. The animation shows that you can only view the stars at night, not during the daytime. You can only begin to see the stars during the twilight hours, so the sector of space would be an arbitrary direction depending on the season, and the stars overhead during the winter would be clear on the opposite side of the universe at night during the summer. Again, day is always towards the sun or towards the center, and so as we theoretically travel around the sun over 6 months, the sector of space visible overhead would be a completely different stars on the opposite end of the universe. I should add that since the sun is hauling butt theoretically through space-time at over 1,000,000 miles an hour around a parabolic curve concentric with the non-existing galactic center, every year we would have a slightly different view of the sector of space, say from January 1st one year to January 1st the next year. Because, again, the sun has traveled, I don't even want to figure it up, but, 1.3 million miles an hour times a year. Let's see. Okay, so we'll do 1,300,000. 1,300,000 miles an hour times 24 in a day. That's 31,200,000 miles in a day. And we'll just do 365 divided by 2 for 6 months. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5,616,000,000 miles in 6 months around a curve. So even though the sun has traveled 11 billion miles through space around a curve over the course of a year, we still see the exact same star January 1st one year to January 1st the next year, 11 billion miles later. But instead, in reality, we always see the exact same stars overhead, and a star in your telescope on January 1st will still be right there the next year where it was last year. This also proves heliocentrism is a theoretical fantasy that couldn't possibly explain observable reality. Also, since we're on reasons why heliocentrism is a total joke, I'll also point out that the sun is not allegedly stationary, but instead it's traveling through space at over 1,000,000 miles an hour around a curve. Also in a counterclockwise direction, much like the Earth and much like the Moon, when standing above the entire system facing down upon the North Pole, everything is apparently rotating counterclockwise according to globularists. Now, that isn't all of the planets, allegedly. Some of them rotate in different directions, but at least the Sun, the Moon, and the Earth all supposedly going counterclockwise. If the Sun is supposedly racing at velocities far greater than the Earth, and the Earth is supposedly racing at far greater velocities than the Moon, this causes pretty major problems in terms of orbital mechanics, logically, simply because the slower satellite bodies, such as the Moon, couldn't possibly loop around the far swifter host bodies, such as the Sun and the Earth, only to accelerate many times faster than the entire system itself after traveling at a high velocity in the opposite direction, no less. Furthermore, since the systems are all in constant motion, during certain orbital situations, it would cause the satellite body, such as the Moon, to essentially stand still in space and just sort of wait for the host to pass by and then loop around the back and accelerate many times faster than the host and the host's host itself, and subsequently beat out the Earth around the outside of the track after traveling in the opposite direction at a slower velocity, only to loop around the front to start the whole entire theoretically comical process over again. If you look at the lines related to the paths ascribed to the orbiting objects in the animations, the issue I'm describing becomes clear. The larger, sort of longer or greater arced lines are represent moving very fast through space, and the tight loops represent the object moving very slowly through space. It's not a constant speed that these objects orbit. It couldn't be because everything's in motion. Assuming that the path of the Sun is at a right angle to the orbital plane, gravity cannot account for the fact that the bodies in conflicting motion are somehow fixed to a common frame of reference, even though they are often traveling in similar velocities, other times traveling in contradicting velocities, and other times racing towards one another where gravity appears to be, instead of pulling everything in towards the center, it appears to cause the slower satellite body to swiftly accelerate or repel itself even from the host and somehow accelerate beyond the speed of the celestial host and the galactic frame of reference, even though the Moon is supposedly the slowest body in the celestial system. The entire theory of orbital heliocentric systems are so preposterous, and they really only work in theory if you assume certain things to be constant or stationary, and if you concede for argument's sake that this is probably just theoretical nonsense, which all of that is absolutely true. But things being constant or stationary in a system where everything's constantly moving is totally not true. It appears I'm slightly straight off course, but the amount of lies and gullible oversights and misunderstandings involved with modern astrophysics is astonishing. Seriously astonishing, and I can't help but point out any of these comical absurdities I continue running into on a seemingly daily basis. The complete disproof of heliocentrism is illustrated by the following table and explanation. First, let me start by stating that with these diagrams and animations in mind, along with the astronomical data coming from Stellarium's own software, can easily be used to verify the point that heliocentrism is wrong. If heliocentrism were correct, any stars overhead during the winter months would be on the opposite end of the universe during the entire summer. We're not talking about a few degrees in space. We're not talking about the tilt of the Earth or the vast distances involved with the stars causing no parallax. These sort of thoughts are completely besides the point and completely, irrelevant and nonsensical anyway, but I've pointed to this proof before, and I've coined the phrase the Jeranism effect because Jaran was the first person, to my knowledge, to make this observation, and I think it's really great that he made such a fundamentally logical and simple observation that completely demolishes any chance heliocentrism might have retained up to that point. I believe we'll see more of this as we continue gathering evidence and scrutinizing the different models. Actually, I think I might have come up with something doing these animations that I think is pretty interesting and also goes really against the grain in terms of heliocentrism, so we shall see, and I'll mention that towards the end, which is coming up pretty soon. But at any rate, with the Jeranism effect, this clearly shows that the summer stars should be unique, just like all seasonal stars should be unique. We should never see one single star or constellation during the winter that we saw during the summer. This fact would be compounded from decade to decade. In other words, the sun's alleged path around the so-called galactic center that doesn't exist would cause our arbitrary sector of visible space to change drastically from year to year. So, in fact, we should never see the same night sky from one year to the next, let alone decades or hundreds of years. Certainly not for thousands. The fact that we see some of the same stars from season to season, many of the same stars from season to season, and as well as constellations, and those have remained constant throughout history. Yeah, the constellations are constant. What do you know? You must be willfully ignorant to continue believing in the spinning globe, and you must admit that you are in a religious cult, not following science as a method of inquiry with truth as your goal, if you fail to acknowledge or consider the points laid out here in this video.